I'm Elizabeth Cooper, 32, and until last Tuesday, I believed blood was thicker than water. That's when my parents announced they were signing over our family home to my younger sister Melissa, the same home I've been helping renovate for 2 years, believing I'd inherit half. You'll understand someday, Dad said, while Mom avoided my eyes. What they didn't know, I had discovered documents that would turn their perfect family portrait into shattered glass. And I was about to use them. Hey everyone. Before I dive into the most devastating family betrayal of my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story of family secrets and ultimate karma resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true family drama stories. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how justice gets served in the most unexpected way. Now, let's get back to how my world fell apart. Growing up in suburban Boston, I was always the reliable Cooper daughter. My parents, Richard and Diane, ran a successful real estate business, and from an early age, I was groomed to be the responsible one. I maintained perfect grades, participated in community service, and even chose my college major, business administration, to align with their expectations of me eventually joining the family business. In contrast, my younger sister Melissa was allowed freedom I never experienced. 3 years my junior, she floated through life with minimal consequences for her actions. Failed classes. She's finding herself. Wrecked her car. Accidents happen. Dropped out of college. College isn't for everyone. The double standard was obvious to everyone except my parents. Despite this, I maintained the perfect daughter facade. After graduating summa cum laude, I declined a prestigious job offer in Chicago to join Cooper Family Real Estate. For 8 years, I worked tirelessly alongside my parents, helping to expand the business by 40%. I lived at home to save money for my future, contributing to household expenses, and spending weekends helping Dad with home renovations. 2 years ago, my parents mentioned their retirement plans, which included eventually passing down both the business and our Victorian family home to the girls. The understanding was clear: Melissa and I would share the inheritance equally, despite my significantly larger contribution to the family business and property maintenance. I accepted this arrangement, believing fairness would prevail eventually. When Dad's health began declining last year, high blood pressure, and early signs of heart disease, I took on more responsibilities at work and home. I managed his medication schedule, drove him to doctor appointments, and handled complex business negotiations he could no longer manage. Mom focused on his care while I kept the business afloat. Meanwhile, Melissa floated in and out of our lives, appearing mostly for holiday gatherings and the occasional Sunday dinner when she needed money or emotional support after another failed relationship. Her latest boyfriend, Tyler, raised immediate red flags, unemployed for mysterious reasons, and always whispering with Melissa when they thought no one was listening. Last Christmas, I overheard Melissa and Tyler arguing in the guest bathroom. "They are loaded," Tyler hissed. "Your sister's been working for practically nothing all these years. There must be a way to speed things up." Melissa shushed him, but not before responding, "I'm handling it. Trust me." I should have said something then, but family dinners had become tense enough with Dad's health concerns. Instead, I doubled down on proving my worth. I secured 3 major property developments that would ensure my parents' comfortable retirement. I spent weekends replacing the roof and renovating the master bathroom in our home. I coordinated Dad's medical care and researched experimental treatments, all while maintaining the facade of the perfect, uncomplaining daughter who never questioned why Melissa's occasional appearances earned her lavish praise while my daily sacrifices went largely unacknowledged. The cracks in my facade began showing last month when I discovered Mom and Melissa having lunch at an upscale restaurant I could never afford on my modest salary from the family business. They didn't see me. I was meeting a client nearby, but I observed them laughing intimately, heads close together over what appeared to be legal documents. Mom hastily tucked them into her purse when the waiter approached. That night at dinner, I casually mentioned seeing them. "Oh, just helping Melissa with apartment hunting paperwork," Mom said dismissively, though I knew Melissa had renewed her lease just 2 months earlier. I'd helped her with the security deposit. The perfect daughter would have accepted this explanation. Instead, I began paying closer attention. Dad's home office had always been off-limits, but with him napping more frequently due to his medication, I found opportunities to investigate. What I discovered in his filing cabinet would forever change my understanding of family loyalty, and set in motion a series of events that would ultimately deliver the most unexpected justice. The manila folder was labeled simply Property Transfer, MC. Inside were draft documents for transferring ownership of our family home, valued at approximately $1.2 million in today's market, solely to Melissa Cooper. Not as a future inheritance to be split between us, but as an immediate gift, with only a stipulation that our parents could continue living there until they chose to relocate to their recently purchased Florida condo. My hands trembled as I photographed every document with my phone. There was also a handwritten note from our family attorney advising that the other matter we discussed regarding the business restructuring would be ready for signatures next week. I didn't need to see those documents to understand what that meant. They were planning to cut me out of the business inheritance as well. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and walked numbly to my bedroom, the same room I'd slept in since childhood. The walls, which I'd recently repainted a calming sage green during one of my home improvement weekends, suddenly felt like they were closing in. Everything I'd sacrificed for, my career opportunities in Chicago, my chance at independence, my personal relationships that had withered under the demands of family obligation, was being erased with a few signatures. That night at dinner, I watched my family with new eyes. Dad complimenting the pot roast I'd prepared while discussing Melissa's latest entrepreneurial idea, a vague wellness coaching business she'd been developing 4 months without any concrete steps. Mom asking about my day at work in the perfunctory way that indicated she wasn't really listening for my response. They were performing the roles of loving parents while plotting to betray me. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 8 years. Instead of staying in bed, I drove to the county records office. My years in real estate had taught me how to research property transactions efficiently. What I discovered sent me reeling. 6 months ago, my parents had quietly transferred ownership of Cooper Family Real Estate to a new LLC, with Melissa listed as the primary stakeholder, and them as minority owners with life interest. My name appeared nowhere on the documents. I expanded my search and found more disturbing information. 5 years ago, Dad had taken out a substantial business loan, using our family home as collateral. The business had struggled more than they'd ever admitted to me. It was my recent property developments, the ones I'd worked 70-hour weeks to secure, that had finally stabilized the company's finances. In essence, I had saved the family business that they were now giving to Melissa. On my way home, still processing this betrayal, I received a text from Melissa, "Family dinner tonight. Big announcement. Don't be late." Attached was a smiling selfie of her and Tyler. I pulled over, unable to drive through my tears. I'd given everything to this family. I'd believed in fairness and reciprocity, and the unspoken contract of family loyalty. How naive I'd been. My phone rang. It was our family attorney, Harold Winters. "Elizabeth, I'm glad I caught you. I wondered if we could meet privately before your family dinner tonight." "Why?" My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. There was a pause. "I've been your family's attorney for 30 years, since before you were born. What's happening? It doesn't sit right with me. There are things you should know." An hour later, I sat in Harold's office, as he slid a folder across his desk. Your grandfather, your mother's father, left specific instructions when he died. The family home and business were left in your parents' care, but with conditions. I've been uncomfortable with how they are interpreting those conditions, but legally. What conditions? I asked. The inheritance was always meant to be divided equally between Richard and Diane's children, with one exception: if either child demonstrated exceptional business acumen and commitment to family legacy, that child could receive a larger portion, up to 75-25 split. I stared at him. And they are interpreting that as giving Melissa everything. Harold looked deeply uncomfortable. They are claiming your decision to work for the family business demonstrates lack of ambition, while Melissa's external ventures show entrepreneurial spirit. The irony was so absurd I actually laughed. So my sacrifice and loyalty are being used against me. Elizabeth, there's more. Your grandfather included a failsafe provision: if any attempt was made to distribute the inheritance unfairly, an independent trustee would evaluate the situation. As your family's attorney, I'm obligated to inform your parents of this clause before they finalize these transfers. I left Harold's office with copies of my grandfather's will and trust documents, my mind racing with both hurt and the first glimmers of a plan. The family dinner announcement was clearly going to be my parents informing me of my disinheritance, presented, no doubt, as a generous gesture toward Melissa's future. As I drove home to prepare for the most difficult dinner of my life, I made a decision. I would not confront them immediately. I would listen to their announcement, accept it with grace, and then methodically set in motion the events that would ultimately deliver justice, not just for me, but for my grandfather's true wishes. The family dinner was exactly the ambush I'd anticipated. Mom had prepared my favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, a transparent attempt to soften the blow. Melissa and Tyler arrived late, her left hand conspicuously adorned with a diamond engagement ring that looked suspiciously like my grandmother's heirloom that Mom had always promised would be mine. We have some exciting news, Dad announced after pouring everyone wine, except for me, whom he'd forgotten to include in the pour. I silently retrieved another glass from the cabinet and served myself. As you know, Mom and I have been thinking about spending more time in Florida. Our retirement should be simple, without the burden of managing multiple properties. He glanced at Melissa, who could barely contain her smirk. We've decided to transfer ownership of the house to Melissa and Tyler, as an engagement present and to provide them stability, as they start their family. I maintained a neutral expression, taking a sip of wine. That's quite a gift, I said evenly. Congratulations. Mom looked relieved at my apparent acceptance. We know you understand, Lizzie. You've always been so practical. And of course, you'll always have a home here with your sister. Actually, Melissa interjected, Tyler and I were thinking of renovating. The master bedroom suite would become our nursery eventually, and we'd need your room for a home office. She at least had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. But we could fix up the basement for you. Or there's that studio apartment above the garage that's almost finished. When would you need me to move? I asked, still maintaining my composure. Tyler spoke for the first time. We were hoping to start renovations next month. So, you know, sooner is better than later. I nodded thoughtfully. And what about the business? Will I still have my position there? My parents exchanged glances. About that, Dad began. With my health concerns, we've been restructuring. Simplifying operations. We've transferred the business to a new LLC, Mom continued. Melissa has shown such interest lately in learning the real estate market. With her fresh perspective and Tyler's background in, what was it again, dear? Financial consulting, Tyler supplied smoothly, though I knew for a fact his only employment had been as a cell phone salesman before mysteriously leaving that position. Yes, financial consulting, Mom repeated. They are going to bring Cooper family real estate into the modern era, while allowing your father to step back from daily operations. I see, I said. And my role in this modernized business? Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. We thought you might want to explore other opportunities, Dad said. You're so talented, Lizzie. You've always been the smart one. Any company would be lucky to have you. We'll provide a generous severance package, of course, Mom added quickly. I took another sip of wine, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. When did you make these decisions? I finally asked. It's been evolving over time, Dad replied vaguely. With my health scare last year, we had to think seriously about succession planning. I nodded again. I understand. Family comes first, after all. Relief visibly washed over my parents' faces. They had expected resistance, tears, perhaps even a scene. My calm acceptance was clearly not the reaction they'd anticipated. There's actually something I'd like to share as well, I said, reaching for my purse. I removed a manila folder similar to the one I'd discovered in Dad's office. I had an interesting conversation with Harold Winters today. The color drained from my mother's face. You spoke with Harold? About what? Grandfather Morrison's will. Specifically, the trust provisions regarding the family home and business. I opened the folder and slid the documents across the table. It seems there are some complications with your transfer plans. Dad snatched the papers, scanning them with growing alarm. These are confidential legal documents. Harold had no right. As a beneficiary of the trust, I have every right to this information, I corrected him. The family home and business aren't actually yours to give away as you please. They are trust assets, subject to specific distribution requirements. What is she talking about? Melissa demanded, looking to our parents. Nothing you need to worry about, Mom said quickly. Just some legal technicalities we'll sort out. These technicalities include the requirement for independent trustee evaluation before any unequal distribution of assets, I continued. And given that I've been working to build the business while Melissa has contributed nothing, I wonder how that evaluation might conclude. You ungrateful, Dad began, his face reddening dangerously. Richard, your blood pressure, Mom cautioned, placing a restraining hand on his arm. I'm ungrateful. I laughed incredulously. I gave up a six-figure job offer to work for you at half the salary. I've lived at home to help with Dad's care. I've spent every weekend for 2 years renovating this house. And your response is to give everything to Melissa and kick me out. It's not like that, Mom insisted. We just want to make sure both our daughters are provided for. Melissa needs the security of the house. While I need what, exactly? The security of a basement apartment and unemployment. I stood up, gathering my documents. I'm not going to create a scene. I'll be out of the house within the week. But before I go, you should know that Harold will be implementing the trustee evaluation process, as required by Grandfather's will. You can't do that, Dad sputtered. You'll tear this family apart. I'm not the one tearing anything apart, I replied, my voice finally breaking. That was your choice. I just wanted to be treated fairly. I walked out, leaving them in shocked silence. In my bedroom, I began packing methodically, tears streaming down my face. A soft knock on my door revealed Mom, her expression a mix of anger and concern. What do you want from us, Elizabeth? She asked. To stop the property transfer. Fine. We can discuss a more equitable arrangement. What I wanted was for my family to value me, I replied. Not just my labor and sacrifice, but me. But that ship has sailed, hasn't it? Now I just want what's legally and ethically mine. And you're willing to involve lawyers and trustees. To air our family business publicly. I paused my packing to face her directly. You weren't concerned about involving lawyers when you were secretly transferring everything to Melissa. Don't pretend this is about family privacy. It's about getting caught. Mom left without another word, and I continued packing, knowing the real battle was just beginning. 3 days after the disastrous family dinner, I moved into a small apartment downtown. The studio was a significant downgrade from my spacious bedroom in the family home, but it came with something I'd never fully had before: independence. I arranged my few belongings, clothes, books, personal mementos, and sat on the window seat overlooking the street below, planning my next moves. Harold had advised me to maintain professional communication with my family while the trustee evaluation proceeded. Don't give them ammunition to claim you're acting out of spite, he cautioned. This needs to be about enforcing the legal terms of the trust, not family drama. Following his advice, I sent a formal email to my parents, copying Melissa, requesting all business documents I was entitled to as an employee. I received no response from my parents, but Melissa called immediately, alternating between tearful pleas and veiled threats. "You're destroying Mom and Dad," she sobbed. "Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. Is that what you want? For him to have another heart attack?" "I want the fair treatment grandfather's trust mandates," I replied evenly. "Nothing more, nothing less. This is about the house, isn't it?" Her tone shifted suddenly. "Fine. Tyler and I can wait on the renovations. You can stay in your room. We'll work something out. This isn't a negotiation, Melissa. The trustee will evaluate how the assets should be distributed according to grandfather's wishes." Her voice hardened. "You've always been jealous of me. Always the perfect daughter, but still second best in their hearts. This is just your way of trying to prove you matter." Her words stung precisely because they contained a grain of truth. I had always sensed that despite my achievements and sacrifices, my parents harbored a special affection for Melissa that I could never earn. But this wasn't about emotional favoritism anymore, it was about tangible assets being distributed unjustly. "Believe what you want," I said finally. "But the trustee evaluation is happening, with or without your cooperation." The next week passed in a blur of legal consultations and job hunting. I scheduled interviews with several competing real estate firms, leveraging my experience and the client relationships I'd built. By Friday, I had 3 solid job offers, all with significantly higher salaries than what I'd been earning at the family business. Meanwhile, Harold had initiated the trustee evaluation process. The appointed trustee, a retired judge named Margaret Holloway, requested comprehensive documentation of the business operations for the past 10 years, as well as detailed information about my and Melissa's contributions to both the business and maintenance of the family property. I provided extensive records, emails documenting business deals I'd closed, financial statements showing the company's growth under my management, receipts for materials I'd purchased for home renovations, and before and after photos of the improvements I'd made. I also included witness statements from clients and contractors attesting to my central role in both the business and property maintenance. What I didn't expect was the psychological warfare my family would wage while the evaluation proceeded. Dad stopped speaking to me entirely. Mom alternated between guilt-tripping texts, "How could you do this to us after all we've sacrificed for you?" and attempts at reconciliation that always circled back to me dropping the trustee evaluation. Melissa launched a more public campaign, posting thinly veiled social media updates about toxic family members who care more about money than love, and the pain of betrayal from those you trusted most. The most difficult moment came when my childhood best friend Ashley called, concern evident in her voice. "Lizzie, what's going on? Melissa told me you're suing your parents for the house because you're jealous of her engagement. That doesn't sound like you at all." I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my hands shook with suppressed anger. "They plan to disinherit me completely, Ashley. After everything I've done for them. This isn't about jealousy, it's about justice. I believe you, Ashley said after a long pause. And for what it's worth, I've always seen how differently they treat you and Melissa. But Lizzie, are you prepared for how ugly this could get? They are your family. They stopped acting like family when they plotted behind my back, I replied. I can't just let them take everything from me. As the trustee evaluation continued, I threw myself into my new job at Meridian Properties, one of Boston's most prestigious real estate firms. The work was challenging and the environment refreshingly meritocratic. My ideas were valued, my expertise respected. For the first time in my professional life, I felt truly appreciated. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. We need to talk. About your family. And what they are really hiding. Attached was a photo of what appeared to be financial documents with Cooper Family Real Estate letterhead. I hesitated, suspecting a trap. But curiosity won out, and I agreed to meet the sender at a public coffee shop the following afternoon. The woman who approached my table introduced herself as Valerie Torres, my father's former accounting assistant, who had left the company abruptly 2 years ago. They told everyone I resigned to care for my sick mother, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. The truth is, I was fired after questioning certain financial practices. She placed a USB drive on the table between us. I kept copies of everything. I always knew someday someone would need to know the truth. What truth? I asked, not touching the drive. Valerie leaned forward. Your parents have been systematically misrepresenting the company's finances for years. Not just to the IIS, but to the bank that financed their expansion 3 years ago. And she hesitated, to your grandfather's trust administrators. My stomach dropped. How do you know about the trust? I processed the annual reports they were required to submit. Reports that paint a very different picture than the company's actual books. She pushed the USB drive closer to me. They've been bleeding the company dry while reporting artificial profits. The business appears successful on paper, but in reality, it's leveraged to the breaking point. Why are you showing me this now? I asked, finally picking up the drive. I saw your name in the trustee evaluation notification. Richard and Diane Cooper ruined my career with false accusations when I tried to speak up. I couldn't get another accounting position for 18 months. I had to move in with my sister. Her eyes hardened. I believe in karma, Elizabeth. What goes around comes around. After Valerie left, I stared at the USB drive, understanding the weight of what it potentially contained. Using this information would likely destroy not just my parents' retirement security, but potentially expose them to legal consequences beyond the trust dispute. Could I really do that to them, despite their betrayal? That night in my small apartment, I plugged in the drive and examined its contents. Valerie's allegations were meticulously documented, years of financial manipulations, falsified reports, and misrepresentations. Most damning were emails between my parents discussing how to manage trust reporting to ensure they maintained control of the assets. My finger hovered over the delete button. This was the nuclear option, information that would not only ensure I received my fair share, but would potentially subject my parents to criminal charges. Was justice worth that price? My phone chimed with a text notification. It was from Melissa. Hope you're happy. Dad's in the hospital. Stress-induced cardiac event. But you don't care about family anyway, just money. Attached was a photo of my father in a hospital bed, looking frail and defeated. My mother sat beside him, her face etched with worry. The sight should have evoked sympathy, but all I felt was a cold certainty that this, too, was manipulation, a calculated attempt to make me abandon my pursuit of justice. I closed the text without responding and turned back to my computer. The choice before me wasn't just about inheritance or revenge, it was about truth, accountability, and whether I would finally stand up for myself after a lifetime of capitulation. Hey everyone, I know I just left you on a massive cliffhanger, but I'd love to know what you would do in my situation. Would you use the potentially devastating evidence, or try to find a more merciful solution? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you're enjoying this roller coaster of family betrayal, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about family karma and unexpected justice. Now, let's continue with what I decided to do with this explosive information. The morning after receiving Valerie's USB drive, I visited my father in the hospital. The cardiac event had been minor, elevated blood pressure and chest pains, but no actual heart attack. Still, seeing him connected to monitors sobered me. Despite everything, he was my father, and I didn't want to cause him physical harm. I asked for a few minutes alone with him, which Mom reluctantly granted after giving me a warning look. When the door closed behind her, Dad immediately dropped the frail patient act, his eyes sharp with anger. "Have you come to gloat?" he demanded. "Or to tell me you're dropping this ridiculous trustee evaluation?" "Neither," I replied quietly. "I came to show you something." I placed my tablet on his lap, open to one of the more damning documents from Valerie's files. "I know about the financial manipulations, Dad. The falsified trust reports. Everything." His face paled, eyes darting to the door. "Where did you get this? Does it matter?" "What matters is that I have it all. Every email, every altered spreadsheet, every misrepresentation to the trust administrators." I took the tablet back. "This goes well beyond our inheritance dispute. What do you want?" His voice was barely audible. "Originally, just what was fairly mine according to grandfather's wishes. Now, I'm not sure there's any way to salvage this situation that doesn't end with serious consequences for you and Mom." His expression hardened. "You'd send your own parents to prison over money? Is that the daughter we raised? You raised me to believe in fairness and honesty, then demonstrated neither," I replied. "But no, I haven't decided what to do with this information yet. I wanted you to know I have it." "Elizabeth," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "We can work this out. As a family. That's what I thought we were for the past 8 years, a family working together. Until I discovered you and Mom planned to leave me with nothing." A knock on the door interrupted us, not Mom returning, but a nurse accompanied by an elegant older woman I recognized immediately, my maternal grandmother, Eleanor Morrison, whom I hadn't seen in nearly 3 years since she'd moved to Arizona following a falling out with my mother. "Grandma." I stood, shocked. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, dear." She embraced me warmly before turning a considerably cooler gaze on my father. "Richard. I see you're not at death's door after all, despite Diane's hysterical phone call." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor. This is a surprise." "I'm sure it is." Her tone was dry. "Elizabeth, would you walk with me to the cafeteria? I could use some tea after that flight." In the hospital cafeteria, over mediocre tea and stale muffins, my grandmother got straight to the point. "Harold Winters called me. He's been concerned about how Richard and Diane have been handling my late husband's trust for some time. When you triggered the trustee evaluation, he felt obligated to inform me as the surviving spouse." I blinked in surprise. I didn't know he could do that. Harold and James were friends for 40 years. My husband knew Richard's flexible approach to financial matters. The trust wasn't just about providing for our grandchildren, it was about protecting the legacy from mismanagement. She reached for my hand. I should have been more involved, but after James died, Diane made it clear she considered my oversight intrusive. To keep peace, I stepped back. So you know about the evaluation process. I know more than that. Her eyes, so similar to my mother's yet sharper, more perceptive, held mine. I've spent the past 2 days reviewing financial records Harold had been quietly collecting. The situation is worse than I imagined. I have additional information, I admitted, telling her about Valerie and the USB drive. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Grandma Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. The question isn't just what's legally right, but what achieves true justice without destroying lives unnecessarily. She hesitated. Including your sister's life. Melissa's been complicit in their plans, I said defensively. Has she? Or has she been manipulated by your parents just as you were, albeit in a different way? Grandma sipped her tea. You were controlled through responsibility and expectations. She was controlled through indulgence and dependency. Two sides of the same dysfunctional coin. The perspective shift was jarring. I'd been so focused on Melissa, as an antagonist, that I hadn't considered her as another victim of my parents' manipulations, just in a different form. What do you suggest? I asked finally. Let me speak with Judge Holloway. Margaret and I serve on the symphony board together. And give me a copy of those files from Valerie. I may have a solution that serves justice without destroying what's left of this family. Over the next week, a strange alliance formed. Grandma Eleanor took temporary residence in Boston, working closely with Harold and Judge Holloway. Valerie provided additional testimony about the financial irregularities. And most surprisingly, Melissa reached out to me privately. Tyler left, she said without preamble when I met her at a park bench far from the family home. After Dad's hospitalization, when it became clear there might not be a house or business forthcoming, he suddenly needed space. Her laugh was hollow. Turns out he proposed because Dad hinted at the inheritance. Some fiancé, right? Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry. Don't be. It opened my eyes. She twisted her now bare ring finger. Mom and Dad have been strange since Grandma showed up. Arguing behind closed doors. Dad keeps saying they had no choice and Mom keeps saying there were other ways. Do you know what they are talking about? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. They've been mismanaging the business and misrepresenting finances to grandfather's trust administrators. There could be serious legal consequences. Melissa's face crumpled. So everything, the house, the business, it's all built on lies. Not everything, I said slowly. The business itself is legitimate, just leveraged and misreported. And the house has real value. But not enough to save them from what they've done. It wasn't a question. That depends on what happens next. Melissa looked at me directly, her eyes, so like mine, I suddenly realized, clear and determined for perhaps the first time in our adult relationship. Then let me help determine what happens next. I'm tired of being the family puppet. As she spoke those words, I felt the first tentative bridge forming between us, not as rivals in our parents' manipulative games, but as sisters finding common ground in the wreckage of family deception. Together with Grandma Eleanor, we began formulating a plan that might salvage what was worth saving while ensuring accountability for years of manipulation and deceit. 2 weeks after my father's hospital visit, we gathered in the conference room at Harold Winter's law office. The atmosphere was tense, my parents sat rigidly on one side of the long table, while Melissa and I sat together on the opposite side. Grandma Eleanor positioned herself at the head of the table, with Harold and Judge Holloway flanking her. Valerie Torres waited in an adjoining room, ready to provide testimony if needed. This meeting is unorthodox, Harold began, but given the circumstances, Judge Holloway has agreed to conduct the trustee evaluation in this format rather than through formal court proceedings. My father shifted uncomfortably. Is this really necessary? We've been discussing a revised arrangement within the family. Richard, Grandma Eleanor cut in sharply. Those discussions occurred after Elizabeth discovered your attempts to disinherit her completely. They are reactive concessions, not good faith negotiations. Judge Holloway cleared her throat. Based on my preliminary review of the documentation provided, there appears to be significant discrepancy between the actual business operations and what was reported to the trust administrators. Her gaze fixed on my parents. This goes beyond the question of how to divide the inheritance, it potentially involves financial fraud. Mom's face paled. We never intended. Intention is difficult to prove, Judge Holloway interrupted. The documented pattern of misrepresentation, however, is quite clear. Harold slid folders to each person at the table. We've prepared several options for resolving this situation. Option 1 involves full disclosure to relevant authorities, which would likely result in criminal charges. Option 2. Criminal charges. Dad's voice rose in panic. This is absurd. We made some reporting errors. Systematic, deliberate falsification isn't an error, Richard, Grandma Eleanor said coldly. It's fraud. Against my husband's trust, against the bank that provided financing, possibly against tax authorities. Option 2, Harold continued steadily, involves significant restructuring of both the business and distribution of assets, with enhanced oversight mechanisms, but no criminal referrals. I watched my parents closely. Dad's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while Mom's expression had shifted from fear to calculation, already assessing how to turn this situation to their advantage. What exactly would this restructuring entail? Mom asked. Judge Holloway opened her folder. The business would be placed under independent management for a period of 5 years, with profits divided according to the original trust provisions, 40% to Richard and Diane Cooper during their lifetimes, and 30% each to Elizabeth and Melissa as beneficiaries. The family home would be sold, with proceeds similarly divided. Additionally, full financial restitution must be made to the trust for all misappropriated funds. Sold? But that's our home. Mom protested. A home you were planning to gift exclusively to one child while evicting the other, Grandma Eleanor reminded her. The property was never meant to be used as a weapon against either of my granddaughters. Dad slammed his hand on the table. This is extortion. If you think we are going to agree to this. Dad, Melissa interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady. Stop. Just stop. I've seen the documents. I've heard Valerie's testimony. She glanced at me before continuing. What you and Mom did, to the business, to the trust, to Elizabeth, even to me, it was wrong. We need to accept the consequences. The shock on our parents' faces at Melissa's defection might have been comical under different circumstances. Mom recovered first, her expression hardening as she turned to me. You turned your sister against us too. Is there no limit to your betrayal? I maintained my composure. I didn't turn anyone against you. Your own actions did that. Melissa made her own decision after learning the truth. The truth, Dad scoffed. The truth is we built everything this family has. We worked while you girls had the luxury of choices. Choices? I laughed incredulously. You groomed me from childhood to join the business, then paid me half what I was worth. You held the promise of inheritance over me while secretly planning to give everything to Melissa. What choices did I have exactly? And you infantilized me, Melissa added. Made me dependent on your handouts. Rewarded me for staying helpless, and punished me whenever I showed independence. You weren't preparing me for success, you were ensuring I'd always need you. Our parents fell silent, perhaps truly seeing us, really seeing us, for the first time. Judge Holloway allowed the moment to stretch before speaking again. There is a third option. One that your daughter Elizabeth proposed, with modifications suggested by Melissa. All eyes turned to me, including my parents, whose expressions now showed the first hints of genuine fear. The business would be restructured into equal quarters, 25% each to all four of us, I explained. But day-to-day management would transfer immediately to Melissa and me, with an independent financial controller reporting directly to the trust administrators. Dad would serve in an advisory capacity only until his full retirement. The family home would be placed in a separate trust, Melissa continued, providing housing security for Mom and Dad during their lifetimes, but with the understanding that ownership will pass equally to both of us eventually. And the financial misrepresentations would be corrected quietly, with penalties paid through the business over time rather than immediate personal liability. Why would you offer this after what we did? Mom asked suspiciously. Because destroying you doesn't fix anything, I said simply. And because despite everything, you're still our parents. This way, you face consequences without losing everything, the business survives, and both your daughters receive what our grandfather intended. Grandma Eleanor's eyes shone with unexpected tears. James would be proud of both of you, she said softly. This solution honors his intentions while showing compassion he might not have in similar circumstances. After hours of negotiation and several private conferences between my parents and their personal attorney, they finally agreed to our terms, not graciously, but with the pragmatic recognition that their alternatives were significantly worse. Legal documents were drawn up for signing the following week, with strict compliance provisions and oversight mechanisms. As the meeting concluded, Dad approached me in the hallway outside, his expression a complex mixture of resentment, shame, and something that might have been respect. You outplayed us, he said quietly. This wasn't a game, Dad. That was always the difference in how we saw things. For me, it was about fairness and family. For you and Mom, it was about control and manipulation. He had no response to that, merely nodding before walking away to join Mom, who was studiously avoiding eye contact with everyone. Melissa and I left the building together, stepping into the bright afternoon sunlight that somehow seemed symbolic of the clarity we'd both found through this painful process. What now? She asked as we paused on the sidewalk. Now we learn how to run a business together, I replied. As equals. Partners. She smiled, a genuine smile without the artifice that had characterized so many of our interactions over the years. I'd like that. And Lizzie. I'm sorry. For everything. We were both pawns in their game, I told her. The difference is, now we get to write our own rules. 1 year later, I stood in the newly renovated offices of Cooper and Cooper Real Estate, the rebranded family business that Melissa and I now ran as equal partners. The past 12 months had been challenging, untangling years of financial misrepresentations, rebuilding client trust, and establishing new business practices, had tested both our professional skills and our newfound sisterly relationship. Our parents had relocated to their Florida condo permanently, partly by choice and partly due to the shame they still felt facing longtime business associates aware of the restructuring. Dad periodically sent suggestions for business operations that we politely acknowledged and mostly ignored. Mom maintained a strained relationship with both of us, her pride still wounded by our alliance and the consequences she'd faced. Grandma Eleanor had become a regular presence in our lives again, dividing her time between Arizona and Boston, offering wisdom without interference. You girls are doing exactly what James hoped for, she told us during her last visit. Building something meaningful together while maintaining your individual strengths. The family home remained in trust as agreed, currently rented to a young family at a fair market rate, with the proceeds supporting our parents' retirement while building equity for our eventual inheritance. Melissa and I had both purchased our own homes, modest compared to the family Victorian, but truly ours in a way that property had never been. More significant than the material resolutions were the personal ones. Melissa had discovered genuine business acumen once freed from our parents' infantilizing influence. She excelled at client relations and marketing, complementing my strengths in operations and finance. We'd developed a respect for each other's abilities that had never existed during our childhood competition for parental approval. "The Henderson contract is finalized," Melissa announced, entering my office with a tablet displaying the signed documents. "That's 3 major developments this quarter. We are outperforming last year's numbers by 32% already." Dad would be simultaneously proud and annoyed that we are doing better without him at the helm, I observed with a small smile. Melissa laughed. "Mom called yesterday. Dropped some hints about visiting this summer and offering her expertise on the Rivera project. Let me guess, you told her we'd love to have her visit, but the business discussions would have to wait until the trustees' annual review." "Something like that." She settled into the chair across from my desk. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found those documents? If you'd never discovered what they were planning?" I considered the question. "I'd probably be living above someone's garage, working for minimum wage, after being blacklisted from every real estate firm in Boston through Dad's connections, and watching you slowly realize that our parents' generosity came with invisible chains. And I'd probably still be with Tyler, thinking I'd hit the jackpot with a house and business I didn't earn, while actually being manipulated by everyone around me." She shook her head. "We both dodged bullets, just different kinds. The strangest part, I reflected, is that in trying to drive us apart by playing favorites, they ultimately created the circumstances that brought us together as true sisters and partners." Valerie Torres, now our financial controller, appeared in the doorway. "Quarterly reports are ready for review, and Judge Holloway's office confirmed next Wednesday for the trustee compliance meeting." We thanked her, and after she left, Melissa raised an eyebrow at me. Ready to show the trustee how 2 supposedly incompetent daughters transformed a failing, fraudulent family business into one of the most respected boutique real estate firms in Boston. "More than ready," I confirmed. "Though I'm still not sure our parents have fully accepted that their plan backfired so spectacularly." "They probably never will," Melissa acknowledged. "But we know. And that's what matters." Later that evening, as I prepared for a rare dinner with both my parents during their brief visit to Boston, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The betrayal had been painful beyond words, the confrontation excruciating, the legal aftermath complex and draining. Yet through it all, I'd discovered strengths I never knew I possessed, the courage to stand up for myself, the wisdom to seek justice without vengeance, the capacity to forge genuine connections even from the ashes of deception. My phone chimed with a text from Melissa, "Strength in numbers tonight. I'll pick you up at 6:30. Remember, we are not seeking their approval anymore." I smiled at the reminder. The most valuable inheritance hadn't been the business, or the house after all, it had been finding my authentic voice and reclaiming my power from those who had tried to diminish it. In standing up for what was rightfully mine, I had gained something far more precious than material assets: self-respect, true sisterhood, and the knowledge that justice, when pursued with both determination and compassion, could heal even the deepest family wounds. As Melissa's car pulled up outside my apartment, I took a deep breath and stepped outside. Whatever lingering tension awaited us at dinner with our parents, we would face it together, no longer rivals in a rigged game, but allies in a new chapter we were writing on our own terms. You know, this journey of discovering family betrayal and finding justice has been one of the most challenging experiences of my life. I'd love to hear if any of you have gone through similar family conflicts, perhaps not involving million-dollar properties, but those moments when you realized someone you trusted wasn't acting in your best interest. Did you confront them? How did you handle it? Drop your experiences in the comments below. If this story of family karma and unexpected sisterhood resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama stories with satisfying resolutions. Sharing this video might help someone else dealing with family betrayal know they are not alone. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family we build through honest relationships is stronger than the one we are born into. Until next time.